time. Go on, it won't hurt you. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Improvised bombs have been thrown at a migrant processing centre in Dover. A man drove up to the facility and threw up to 3 devices which had fireworks attached to them. Border Force and military personnel were later seen extinguishing a fire along the perimeter. A Reuters photographer who witnessed the incident says the man then drove to a nearby petrol station where he claimed his own life. An army bomb disposal team is at the site examining the scene. Well, the attack comes after British authorities said yesterday was extremely busy in terms of migrant activity, with nearly 1,000 people crossing the channel in 24 small boats. It brings the total number of rescues so far this year to almost 40,000. A period of national mourning has been declared in South Korea following a deadly stampede which killed more than 150 people. 22 foreign nationals from 12 countries are among the victims who were crushed during the Halloween celebrations in Seoul. Most were in their teens and their 20s. More than 80 people were injured. The country's president, who visited the scene, has ordered a thorough investigation into the cause. Australian Nathan Tavaniti described a wave of people in a narrow alley. One of his friends died.
There's so many people. What are you going to do with 10 people? Yeah. And I had to turn around and I told the crowd, you can't come this way. People are dying. Because I already knew how bad it was. And people were being so rude. And I had to tell them, you can't come this way. And then it took so long for emergency services to arrive.
Serious security concerns have been raised following reports that the phone of the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, was hacked. The government has been urged to launch an urgent investigation into the apparent breach. Citing unnamed sources, the Mail on Sunday says spies, suspected of working for the Russian president, gained access to sensitive information while she was running for the Tory leadership. It also claims up to a year's worth of messages were downloaded, including top-secret details about Ukraine. The West has accused Russia of weaponizing food after the country suspended a Black Sea grain deal. Moscow's move follows a claim that its fleet in Crimea was attacked by drones, which it says now have been recovered and analysed. Russia's ambassador to Washington suggested British military specialists helped Ukraine organise the strike, which the UK denies. A series of Royal Mail strikes planned for the next 2 weeks have been called off. The Communication Workers Union says it decided to delay the action after receiving a letter from the company's legal team. Members of the CWU are involved in a long-running dispute over pay and working conditions. The union says strikes will resume on the 12th of November. The Bank of England is expected to unveil its biggest interest rate hike in 33 years as it works to tackle inflation. Economists believe the Monetary Policy Committee will increase the rate by 0.75 percentage points to 3% on Thursday. It comes amid warnings that spending cuts and tax hikes under the new Prime Minister could lead to a deeper recession. And the number of rough sleepers in London has increased by 21% in a year. City Hall figures show there were over 5,000 people on the capital's streets between April and September. The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, is urging the government to take immediate action to tackle rising bills and housing costs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Well, who'd have thought it? We're going to have to pay road tax for our electric vehicles a lot sooner than anticipated. I mean, it was clearly on the cards, but that was a lot further in the distance. Unfortunately, the electric car con has worked a little too well, and to plug the hole in the revenue from the loss of an ever-growing number of motorists who are now exempt, having, I believe, fallen for this, just like the good old diesel days when we were sold that pipe dream, which turned out pretty badly when we all discovered that diesel was in fact the spawn of Satan. On this current trajectory, fuel and excise duty will be zero by 2040. Electric cars will sadly, unlike combustion engines, need to be charged twice. Firstly, at the pump to get them going, and then on the road to keep them going. And on top of that, there are murmurs of a charging system based on how many miles you clock up, which sounds a bit big brothery to me, almost as though this was always the plan. The Chancellor, which for now is Jeremy Hunt, is apparently contemplating forcing people with electric cars and vans to pay this tax by 2025. He is also, it is reported, looking to reduce or scrap many of the incentives that have encouraged people to go down this route in the first place. The lack of cash coming in has been described as an emergency situation, which, in my view, is much of their own making. And now we, the suckers, will be squeezed like lemons with cuts to spending to boot to keep markets happy. And let's not forget, we are in an energy crisis which is forcing up domestic energy bills, which are being subsidised by the government, so that's us, which we will have to pay back over the next few decades. How on earth do they think that the average person trying to carve out a living can afford this nonsense? The only good thing about moving electric car tax forward 5 years before the 2030 ban on the sale of new petrol vehicles is that there is hopefully enough time for people to vote with their wallets. I mean, I'm all for a cleaner environment, but I cannot see how electric cars will work and in that sort of arbitrary time frame that they've given. And huge credit to Rishi Sunak for copping out of COP27. It's ironic that those insisting that he goes, like Sir Keir Starmer, are also calling for decarbonisation incentives, which in my view smacks of hypocrisy. Think of the carbon that was pumped into the atmosphere last year when some 20,000 attended COP in Glasgow, many getting there by private jet. In actual fact, no one should be flying there. If these people are serious, they should have the conference via Zoom. Remember how the electric vehicles there couldn't cope and a diesel generator had to be used instead? Where are the charging points? What is the plan for people in high-rise and those without driveways? And at 44k a pop, how on earth do you expect people to be able to afford these damn things in the first place? It's a joke. Before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella Braverman? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reinstated Braverman as Home Secretary after she breached the ministerial code, and Labour have called upon Number 10 to be more transparent about the incident as members of the Cabinet have stepped in to defend Braverman, dubbing her a first-rate politician. Michael Gove actually said this. Now, this all comes as record numbers of illegal migrants have reached British shores, begging the question, is it time to focus on the real issues at hand? At 4:50, it's World View, and I'll be getting the latest from all around the globe, including the latest gaffe of US President Joe Biden, who failed to remember the number of states they are in America.
And by the way, if they do, that means, not a joke, everybody, that's why we were defeated in 2018 when they tried to do it. We went to 54 states.
Dear me, dear me. He also mispronounced our Prime Minister's name.
We've got news. Rashid Sunak is now the Prime Minister.
Russia Sunak. And at 5, outside, joining me live, Stanley Johnson. He'll talk highs, lows and lessons learned, what comes next on the outside. Of course, he's well known for being the father of our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and he's worked as a Conservative MEP as well as being a staunch environmentalist. Stanley has enjoyed life in the limelight, appearing on a number of reality TV shows, including I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He'll be joining me live in the studio just after 5. That's on the way in the next hour. Tell me what you think as ever on anything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also former editor of the Labour List, Peter Edwards. Welcome, both of you. Nice to see you both, by the way. It's lovely to see you. And welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
Don't be frightened. You're not a rabbit trapped between two beauties.
I think it must be quite frightening to be sitting between you and me, frankly. But there we are.
I've dealt with many things in life, but Christine poking me in the first minute of the show and kind of rubbing my hips was a bit strange, but I'll fight on.
So, Peter, what is your take on electric vehicles? I mean, are you a passionate EVer?
No, I mean, I'll drive, like most people, I've got a petrol car and they're still very expensive. And I think you're obviously very critical, it wasn't really a balanced view you presented. I guess...
Well, this is my view.
Yeah, but I think it's maybe worth taking account of some of the realities as well, which is we're going to run out of fossil fuels eventually. And for anyone living, especially in a city in the UK, air pollution is getting worse and worse. I live in London. I'd imagine perhaps you and Christine do as well. I live in East London. The air quality is deteriorating hugely. What would you do instead?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't put an arbitrary figure of 2030, 2050 and do that. I certainly wouldn't do that. And if I was transitioning to that, I think I would actually look at some cleaner fossil fuels that we have at the moment. You can also make fossil fuels with things, not just actually fossil fuels. You can make it with, you can actually, farmers can make fuel as well. I would look at different types of fuel, and I would also have a realistic target. So, say in 2030, well, how are you going to do that? I live somewhere where I don't have a drive. I don't know how I'm going to charge that. They expect me to, put a cable outside my house. Somebody trips on that, I'm going to be sued. I can't afford £44,000 for an electric car. How are they going to do that? What I'm saying is that it's totally unrealistic. And if they're going to set figures like that, show me the workings. When are they going to put in all the different stations for us to charge the cars? What about all the petrol stations? How are they going to do it?
I think there are tons of challenges about the rollout.
Yes,
and you
lots of
picked up
challenges.
some of them, and obviously most of the viewers don't want and don't necessarily have 44k to spend on a car, which is a humongous figure. I think I've never spent more than about £5,000 or £6,000 on a car. I'd imagine that will come down over the years.
I hope so.
On the point about targets, though, all governments set targets, whether it's in health or education or the environment. They don't hit them all, but having a target does focus the minds of industry and the public and other parts of the state or the public sector. So I think there is a case for targets because it focuses people's mind, even though inevitably some will be missed.
Well, if you have a target, I'd expect some sort of critical path analysis. So by this stage, we're going to have this ready. By that stage, that'll be ready. By that stage, that'll be ready. Then by this year, it should be all done. I'm not seeing that coming.
Well, that's a question for the government,
isn't it? Well, that's what I'm saying. So if you're going to set a target, show the workings. Christine?
Well, it's a question of balance, isn't it, between incentivising people to have electric cars. We all know why electric cars are good.
Yeah.
You've just explained perfectly well about the environment. Of course, they're good in a way, but it's like solar panels. You needed enough incentive to make enough people put solar panels. But then, in all fairness to everybody else, you have to stop that incentivising. And we're getting to the stage when people with we will be getting to the stage when people with electric cars are going to have far too much incentive, and it is not going to be fair on the rest of us. I was somebody who was incentivised to buy a diesel car, and great, that worked out. I've now switched to petrol because I want to be able to, I don't live in London, but I want to be able to come in and out without paying the ULEZ charge. So I think, at the moment, what is it? Fuel duty is 53p a litre and 20% VAT on that, whereas when you're charging your electric car, domestic electricity has 5% VAT. It's not fair. They've got to level up the playing field. Targets are all very well, but don't set them in concrete because you're always going to have to change them. And I think also electric cars aren't a panacea. They're not the be-all and end-all. Batteries are not guilt-free. Batteries are not, the be-all and end-all. You need all these things like lithium and goodness knows what to go into them.
Petrol cars are going. The government has a ban on them being manufactured. Clearly, there'll be a legacy stock for many more years, a decade or two, I'd imagine, because many of us drive an old car. But petrol cars are going. So whatever one feels about the rollout and the motivations and the incentives is just a fact. It's reality. They're not going to be here.
Well, they said that about our records, and we still play records.
I kept my records,
exactly,
but
exactly.
I don't think they're harming the environment.
I think it's 2050 they're going... Is it 2050 they're going to be... I shall be long dead.
Sooner.
So, I should probably be long dead anyway. But, and also the other point about electric cars is if you live in the middle of nowhere, there just aren't charging points. You might be able to install one at your house, but if you want to go any distance, how do you know whether you're going to be able to fill up, as it were?
I don't think, nobody's saying
It's
that...
all very fledgling and new, this whole business.
And I'm actually personally not convinced either. And yes, we say we're going to run out of fossil fuels. I think that there could have been a better way of trying to harness what we currently have.
Fracking.
Use the current combustion engine and try and find other types of fuel that you can use that without having to destroy a whole fleet of cars. If we're talking about protecting the environment, there are other factors. I mean, where you're mining the lithium. I mean, what about those poor people there? Where you're getting the cobalt from, what about those people there? It's just transferring the guilt somewhere else.
It's not that simple. I think you're absolutely right to question where the energy for batteries come from. And there is an issue about kind of offshoring some of our emissions. But, I live in London. Remember, there was an inquest, I think, 12 to 18 months ago that established for the first time a child living on the North Circular being killed by air pollution with that named on the death certificate. I think the starting point of this discussion should be there is an air pollution emergency.
Well, yeah, there potentially, but I think there's another starting point, which we have to start at the start when you're making that electric car. What are you doing to the people where you're getting the lithium from? What are you doing to the people in the environment? What are you doing? We need to go back instead of just looking at the end product, which is a nice car that gives off no emissions, and we're all happy. You talked about one child, dying from air pollution. There'll be thousands of people, slave labour. There's the whole gravy train that goes somewhere else, and we're just offsetting the problem.
Well, I mean, there may be an air pollution problem in certain areas. I wouldn't say it's an air pollution emergency. In 99% of the country, I wager, there is no air pollution problem, maybe slightly localised next door to a particular factory. But most people, unless you live in the centre of one of our big cities, most people don't suffer air pollution.
Well,
so
you're not quoting any facts. You're saying I imagine and possibly 99%. I think, do you have a fact?
But why put a blanket ban on something which is only going to cause problems in certain small areas?
Well, I don't think air pollution is a small problem. I think when air pollution has been named on the death certificate of a child...
It's a big problem in small area. A big problem in small areas.
Well, London is the largest area in the country.
Well,
not
no, if you compare it to
area.
the entire United Kingdom, though, it's kind of... yes, it's big, but there's a lot of people...
No, most people live in towns and cities in Britain.
If you look at the entire the United Kingdom, London is quite small in comparison to
most people live in towns and cities,
But that's what Christine was talking
about. But they don't have air pollution problems. Smaller towns and cities don't have air pollution problems.
Would you have any facts to support that?
No, I haven't got any facts to support that, but it doesn't mean to say it's not true.
Yeah.
My goodness. You've got to aim a bit higher than that, I think.
No, that's a bit unfair.
It doesn't.
No, that's a little bit unfair, because you said you think I believe that... And we have to...
Well, you tell me, what is the air pollution in Cirencester?
Yeah.
Well, Cirencester's not a city.
That's irrelevant. What is it?
Bath?
Well, I don't know. I don't think that invalidates my argument.
There you are. You don't know either.
You haven't got any facts either.
Exactly.
No, I gave there's an air pollution emergency.
What do you know about that? You said there's an air pollution emergency. Can you qualify that?
Yeah.
Because one child died.
Christine. So, to me, and I'm sure, you're all human beings, whether you'll have different views to me, but we'd all accept that air pollution being named on the death certificate of a child is a cause for immense concern.
No, but that's not the point we're making at all. And I'm saying let's go back, let's backtrack where this whole electric car comes from. There's one child there, I feel very sad for that. But if I'm going all the way back, I'm seeing children who are in slave labour. I'm seeing cobalt and things being mined. I'm seeing environmental damage creating these electric cars. I'm seeing a massive carbon footprint for these cars to be travelled all around the world. Actually, to create one of these cars is a huge carbon footprint. And once you've only done 70,000 miles, I do have facts for this one, once you've got 70,000 miles, then you'll start to recoup the carbon that was made by making the car in the first place. Some of them won't even last that long.
No, and I think that's a fair point, that the life of the car needs to be a certain period for them to kind of net off the emissions in making the car.
Exactly.
Because, making a car creates a lot of emissions in the first place. And I think you've also got a point about battery production and mining. But what I would say is that can't be solved by the UK government. If we're sourcing batteries or...
Well, it can.
No, that requires international cooperation.
Well, listen. I think we could... I'm enjoying this conversation. We're going to talk about it for a lot longer. But let's see what they think, because this show's nothing without you and your views. Please send me your thoughts on that monologue. I'd like to hear at GBNews. Now you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, our Great British Debate this hour. I know, that wasn't it. There's more. I'm asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella Braverman? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has come under fire after reinstating her as Home Secretary after she breached the ministerial code. Now, this all comes as a record number of illegal migrants have reached British shores over the last year, which begs the question, is it time to start focusing on the real issues in hand? Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. I've got a poll up right now asking you that question. Is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella Braverman? Cast your vote now. We'll be back after this.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, welcome. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. And don't forget, you can download the GB News app where you can check out all the programmes that we have here on the channel. I'm Nana Akua, and it's just coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. Now, before the break, I was discussing taxing electrical cars. Remember those ones, electric cars even. Let's see what you've been saying. Colin says, I don't understand why hybrid cars are not considered more acceptable than full electric. Yes, petrol is still used, but the batteries are recharged by driving. I mean, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's what joining me obviously is Christine Hamilton, also Peter Edwards. Yeah, that's what
We've got a hybrid. When we weren't going to be able to come into London without paying ULEZ in an old diesel car, we switched to a hybrid, which is great.
Well, Paul says anyone who has the means to obtain a new car by the electric or not can obtain a new electric car. As time goes by, the EV second-hand market will grow. Yeah, that's if they last that long. Mark says electric cars are simply virtue signalling toys for the rich. In 20 years' time, they will be all valueless white elephants. I'm inclined to go along with it. I think they'll go the same way as Betamax videos. Remember those? Right, it's time now for our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella Braverman? And that obviously is assuming that you believe there is one. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reinstated Braverman as Home Secretary after she previously resigned over what was described as multiple breaches of the ministerial code. Now, Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove defended her, describing her as a first-rate politician who deserves a second chance. However, of course, Labour slammed the move, calling upon the government to be more transparent over the incident. Since 2016, the country has seen 7 Home Secretaries come and go, including Theresa May, Amber Rudd, Shahid Javid, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, Grant Shapps, and then back to Suella again. Or did she? No, she went and was there a new one in between? Who knows? And of course, a return to Suella Braverman once more. That's us. Over 38,000 illegal immigrants have made it to British shores this year, which includes 10,000 men from Albania. And this all begs the question whether people are focusing on the real issues at all. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Braverman? Just get on with the job. So I'm joined now by former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, thank you very much for joining me. Do you think that the Prime Minister made the right decision in reappointing Suella Braverman?
Well, I don't know whether she's the best person for the job at all, but what I do know is now that she's in post, we should keep her there. I mean, the ridiculous kind of whirligig of chancellors, prime ministers, home secretaries being thrown out, it makes our nation look a laughingstock. And at least Braverman is on the right side of the arguments, in the sense as at least different from our friends in the Labour Party, who I think would like to see more migrants come to our country. And I don't know about you, but I find it almost impossible to understand how expensive this is all becoming. I mean, literally, it's going to cost us 2 or 3 billion a year. You've got the Labour lot all saying, oh, well, we should, stop the non-DOMs coming here, but stop them. They've got no idea about what to do about this invasion. And we have a very serious case in this country now. There's a lot of anger there, which you have seen played out literally just before midday today, in which clearly a mentally deranged man has thrown petrol bombs and then killed himself down at Dover. And the whole atmosphere at Dover is a tinderbox. The Times reported on Saturday morning that, in fact, residents are now carrying stuff around with them in their house because members of the migrant community who haven't actually been deposited and gone straight to Manston are wandering around their gardens or coming through their houses. This is a massively serious political issue, which seems to be treated in the same way. I'm not trying to be rude about your debate, as electric car tax. This is a dominant subject matter within voters' households. And the truth about the matter is, whether it be Labour, which is really out of the question, frankly, or whether it's the Conservatives, whoever solves this issue will be elected in 2024. And whoever doesn't come up with any solutions, and to be honest with you, I partially agree with the Labour argument. Oh, you've been running the joint for 12 years now. What have you done about it? Actually, it's only become a major issue over the last kind of 3 years. I mean, if you take the Albanian position, the Albanians are literally 2 years ago, there were 50 of them arriving. Last year, there were 800, and now there's 12,000.
Well, Gavin, hold it right there. Stay there, because I'm going to have a quick chat with the immigration lawyer, Harjap Singh Bangal. Harjap, OK, so, look, Braverman has been reappointed a second time. Do you think that do you think that what you're saying is something that really needs to be done, or do you think that perhaps she needs to go?
I think they just need someone competent in the job, somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody with their ear to the ground, somebody with experience in the field. They don't have anyone like that. They're just shuffling their mates about, back and fro. That's exactly what's happening. We can't expect something. It's almost like saying there's a hole in a ship, loads of holes. Let's change it. Let's change the captain, and that'll help it stay afloat. Well, it doesn't even matter whether you have Sinbad the Sailor or Captain Jack Sparrow on there. It's going to sink if you've got that many holes on there. What we have got is the foundation is the Home Office. The Home Office is not fit for purpose. Every year for the last 10 years, a Select Affairs Committee report tells us that. It says this machinery is broken. It can't do the job it's supposed to do. It doesn't matter who you make as the leader of that. The whole machinery is rotten. It needs a total overhaul. Until that's done, there's not going to be a solution to this.
I mean, we can't change the whole thing now, as much as some people would love that to happen. But with regard to the asylum seekers, I mean, I just want to bring you back to what happened, because a whistleblower has told GBNews that some asylum seekers have been held longer than they should at the Manston Processing Centre in Kent. I mean, can we get your reaction to that, as well as today's incident in Dover, where a man threw a number of fire bombs at an immigration facility?
That's no surprise that immigrants are being held there. Some immigrants have been held, or migrants, asylum seekers have been held in detention for up to 14 months, while their application hasn't been decided. An asylum application can take half a day to be decided. Yet there's a backlog of about 50,000 cases which have been waiting more than a year for a decision. More than a year for a decision. You can get a decision on a mortgage quicker than you can on an asylum claim, even with the interest rates this high. There's no excuse for that. So we have to go back to the fact that the machinery is broken. It's not fit to do the job it's due. That's where it all stems from. We're not just saying let's do it overnight, but to have not done it in over 12 years, that should tell you about the next two, and about the people in charge, and about the people they're putting in charge. They're not fit to run the department.
But it could be a risk changing government just to see if it happens, because we could be doing the whole cycle again. We'll stay right there, because I'm also joined by the chairperson of Migration Watch, Alp Mehmet. Alp, thank you so much for joining us. Now, do you think that there is some sort of witch hunt against Suella Braverman just to get rid of her? Or do you think that she definitely deserves a second chance and actually she's probably the best person for the job?
Unquestionably a witch hunt going on. If you look at those who are actually laying into her, those who are keenest to get rid of her, it's actually those who oppose what she proposes. And we know what policies that she's going to, if given an opportunity, try to implement, because she told us at the party conference she wants to tackle the channel, but she also wants to tackle the out-of-control, massive legal immigration that's going on. And this is what it's all about. As ever, whenever a politician comes up with policies that are actually, they stand a chance of working and are popular, they immediately, the opposition, the Labour Party, but everyone else as well, people from within the Conservative Party, it has to be said, they ignore the policies and go for the person. I think it's appalling the way they've been doing that and picking on a woman unjustly, in my opinion, because
I just want to bring back in.
Please, Nana, please let me just say this. For 40 years, I worked for the government. I worked for ministers. I worked for all sorts of people at the centre of government. And what Suella Braverman allegedly did, frankly, is nothing compared to some of the things that I saw happening over 40 years. And it wasn't that long ago when Oliver Letwin, who was in the government, in the cabinet at the time, was actually destroying papers, sensitive papers, and putting them in a park bin.
Well, let's get Harjab.
Yes,
I want to get Harjab. I gave you that bit up. Can I get Harjab in there then? Harjab, you've already said, do you think that perhaps this is some sort of witch hunt for Suella Braverman?
Well, I would always say just because there are more incompetent people in government doesn't mean you let the less incompetent ones off. We should make sure that everyone is held accountable. If it was something serious enough for her to resign or get sacked or whatever the situation was, and a week later you're giving her another chance, it doesn't bode really well for the future. Home Secretary should know what she's doing or who she's sending emails to or who not to. And frankly, the fact was that, okay, the proof's going to be in the pudding. We've got 2 years with her. We'll see whether the numbers go down, whether they go up. They haven't been done so far. We've had many people who have claimed competency and have come up with policies and have claimed we're going to do this and we're going to do that in manifestos, yet the numbers aren't going down. We know that they're going up. It's already 38,000 and we've got another 2 months to go this year. We're probably going to hit more than 40,000, I would think, easily, if not round about the 42,000 ballpark figure, which bodes for next year. What are we going to have? Are we going to have 50,000 next year? Are we going to have 60,000?
Well, I mean, that's just speculation. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know what it'll be like next year. You know, it's all speculation. But Calvin, I'm going to give the last word to you. In your view, do you think there is some sort of witch hunt against Suella Braverman? And if that is the case, do you think getting rid of her will actually help to solve the problem of migration?
Getting rid of her will achieve nothing, except it might satisfy some lefty lawyers, I suspect. No, we should keep her off.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you very much. Thank you so much to Calvin McKenzie. He's the former editor for The Sun. Harjab Singh Bengali, he's there. He, also from UK migration lawyer, and also Alp Mehmet from Migration Watch. Thank you so much. Right, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. There's never enough time. After the break, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella Braverman? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also former editor of the Labour List, Peter Edwards. And then don't forget, at 5 o'clock, stay with me, because Stanley Johnson will be in the studio to talk about the highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. He is the head of the Johnson's family dynasty, and he's the father of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's famed for being a staunch environmentalist, and he's enjoyed life in the limelight after appearing on a load of reality shows, including I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. We'll get some juicy gossip from him later. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 4:34. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Improvised bombs have been thrown at a migrant processing centre in Dover. A man drove up to the facility and threw up to 3 devices which had fireworks attached to them. Border Force and military personnel were later seen extinguishing a fire along the perimeter. A Reuters photographer who witnessed the incident says the man then drove to a nearby petrol station where he claimed his own life. An army bomb disposal team is at the site examining the scene. Hundreds of people have fallen into a river after a suspension bridge collapsed in India. At least 40 people have been killed, but it's feared that number will continue to rise. 30 people are critically injured. The incident happened in western Gujarat state in the town of Morbi. A period of national mourning has been declared in South Korea following a deadly stampede which killed over 150 people. 22 foreign nationals from 12 countries are among the victims who were crushed during Halloween celebrations in Seoul. Most were in their teens and 20s. More than 80 people were injured. The country's president, who visited the scene, has ordered a thorough investigation into the cause. A series of Royal Mail strikes planned for the next 2 weeks have been called off. The Communication Workers Union says it decided to delay the action after receiving a letter from the company's legal team. Members of the CWU are involved in a long-running dispute over pay and working conditions. The union says strikes will resume on the 12th of November. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Nana's back in a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank and, of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
So this is coming up to 39 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome. If you've just joined us, where have you been? This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. Now let's return to our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella Braverman? Now, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak reinstated her as Home Secretary after she previously resigned over what was described as multiple breaches of the ministerial code. The Home Office has seen 7 Home Secretaries come and go in the last 6 years. I mean, that is way too many. And this all comes as nearly 40,000 illegal migrants have come in onto our shores via dinghy this year, which begs the question whether people's focus is actually in the right place. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella Braverman? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also former editor of The Labellist, Peter Edwards. So, Christine, let's start with you, Christine, because this is Suella Braverman. I personally feel there's a witch hunt because what is it she did? She just sent some emails, but they went to the wrong person, or they went to the right person, but she shouldn't have sent them from a personal address. Is that a big, big deal?
Well, I don't think Sunak had any choice, really, but to reinstate her, because without his support, her support, he might not be where he is now. I mean, she was critical in swinging all her supporters behind him. But the Home Office is notorious, isn't it? It's one time bomb piled up on top of another. And, you know, there's so many different areas when it can go off. It's a graveyard for a lot of politicians. And I think one of Suella Braverman, one of her problems is that her officials, a lot of her officials seem to be against her. They're leaking against her. One of them apparently said that she's making us nostalgic for the good old days of Priti Patel. So whether it's... I think these things have to be investigated. You can't have senior officers of state, one of the, 3 great officers of state, leaking emails. It's, you know, however unintentional it was. Who was it to? It was to Sir John Hayes. It went to his wife by mistake or something. And there was it seemed to be some sort of cover-up. But these things do have to be investigated. And the Labour Party, I mean, the job of an opposition is to oppose, and the Labour Party would be dereliction of duty if it didn't press all these things, I think. I agree that it may come over as a bit of a witch hunt, and it probably more so because she's a woman. Let's be sexist about it. But I think, you know, these are very serious issues. Very serious issues.
Because, I mean, remember when Priti Patel, she had all that thing, the allegations of bullying, which I suspect was possibly the other way around. That's how I saw it. Because there were lots of civil servants who'd been in post for a long time, they'd been in that position.
Oh, they don't like it being shaken up.
And they don't like things being moved around. They did that to, was it Amber Rudd, who she disappeared quickly as well. Isn't it time we stopped doing this? And whilst what she did was wrong, she did the right thing in saying that she should resign because she breached the code. Then he's reinstated her, which is good because he needed her support, and also she's good at the job. Don't we need to focus on getting the job done?
How can you call it a witch hunt when she's in the wrong? A witch hunt is a persecution of someone who is innocent or for a misdemeanour they didn't commit. She committed it and she admitted it, and she's only been brought back because it's a sop to the Tory right who Rishi Sunak needs to keep on side. That's before you even get onto the national security risk. There have been a few stories in the papers in the last 4 or 5 days, some from unnamed sources at kind of other embassies and other intelligence-sharing nations saying, are we going to share with a Home Secretary who sends stuff to a home email, so that's like Gmail or Yahoo, and then accidentally sends it to an MP's wife, and I believe a researcher as well. So she's potentially dangerous, but she broke the rules. Yeah, well, yeah, lots of them have broken the rules, let's be honest. I mean, whilst that is bad, and I think she should have some sort of training so that she is aware of the whole situation and doesn't make that sort of mistake, I would say there's a witch hunt. And I would say that even though somebody may have done something wrong, it's the fact that people are constantly leaking all over the place about this. There doesn't seem to be any sort of loyalty to each other. Well, she's leaking as well. She's sending stuff to her Gmail or Yahoo account. That's true, but like I said, though, that I don't believe that that's something that ultimately you should be getting rid of people repeatedly, constantly. Give them some training. Give them a chance to get this right so they don't make that mistake. Well, Labour, of all parties, should believe in second chances. Yes. But and there's a record in all parties of people that resigned over a misdemeanour coming back. But A, they tend to come back after a year or two, not 6 days. B, they tend to come back into a more junior position. And C, they don't have vital, sensitive national security information at their fingertips. So you would rather that we did this whole thing and then we go and find another Home Secretary and then we start all over. Listen, we've got a migration crisis going on here and something needs to be done, and we can't keep regurgitating people in this manner. What she did, yes, she said she's apologised, she got it wrong. I think she needs training. I don't think she needs to be thrown out. Well, I want her to stay because I think she's on the right lines about the important things. And this is, in a way, it is a sideshow. But as Peter said, it's an important sideshow because other people, foreign governments, etc., are going to worry about whether they can trust her with important information. But no, I want her to stay. I think it was Kelvin Mackenzie said, whoever gets the immigration situation or the illegal immigration situation sorted is going to win the next election. It is a very key fundamental plank. And she, I think, had made a very good start, and I wanted to be able to get on with that. But, you know, you can't just expect to behave in the way that she has, and it just immediately people just say, oh, well, never mind, just carry on as normal. Let's have a quick investigation and then get on with the job. And maybe give her some training so she doesn't sort of keep doing that. Because honestly, the amount of time... If the Home Secretary needs training, we really are in a mess. Well, no, but I don't think that's a problem, though, because, listen, the way these ministers are shifting from someone as a Transport Secretary, somebody's this, then your Education Secretary that week, and then they're that, and I mean, a lot of them's going into jobs where they don't really have any real understanding, I
suspect of the role. She has some legal training. She totally gets the role. She probably needs a little bit more understanding in terms of security. I don't think you should have to get rid of her.
Shouldn't need it. I mean, basic telephone security, we're all hopeless at it, and we all sort of stick our passwords on a post-it note in front of the computer and all that sort of thing. But anybody who gets to that very high level in politics must surely have had so many lessons and training about how to keep things secure, how not to use your own email, not to use your personal telephone, surely.
This was not a moment of naivety by a 21-year-old trainee. This was a lawyer and a cabinet minister sending secret information to her home email address.
Yeah,
so I don't think we should treat this as an inadvertent misdemeanour, like leaving a door open or not sellotaping up a file.
Nobody said that. Nobody said that. She also even sent it to the wrong person. So that's just a bit of clumsiness, really. That's
so it's incompetent as well as dangerous.
Yeah, but then I'm balancing it off against what she potentially could be for the Home Office, and I think we need somebody like this to sort of get on with this problem of immigration. We've got a serious problem on our hands. We can't keep going, oh, well, you did this, you did that. OK, that's wrong. She's owned up to it. She stood up. She actually resigned, which was more noble than most of the politicians.
But it appears to be...
But she's been reinstated, and I think she deserves to be reinstated.
He had to reinstate her. He had no choice.
Sorry, and I don't mean to interrupt, but it appears disputed over whether Suella Braverman owned up or whether she was confronted by Home Office officials. We've now read different versions of that in the last week, so I'll be very interested to know the answer to that.
But this is the thing, though. We're focusing on these little things. We know that she made the mistake, all right? The other bits around it, I don't really think are that relevant because we've got a huge migration crisis. We can't keep going on about, well, was it, did you do it? We know what she did. We know she did it wrong.
We don't know.
We don't know, but we know she's owned up. Whoever, whether it's somebody told her to own up or whether she did, we don't need to waste time with that bit. She got it wrong.
Well, we're not clear she owned up, and I'd say it's not...
But it's irrelevant.
No, I'd say truthfulness is not irrelevant.
Well, this all goes back to Boris, doesn't it? I mean, does it matter that he didn't have a piece of cake or he didn't have some Prosecco when he was doing the right things in the other direction?
When he claimed that there was... Angela Rayner wasn't there when she was. When he said that
completely acquitted.
Well, yeah, exactly. I wonder how that happened.
Acquitted.
It shouldn't... I mean, I don't think he should have been acquitted. That's my view. I can't see much difference between what Boris did and what he did, yes.
The Westminster bubble gets absolutely obsessed by minutiae. It was ever thus.
And I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem, and it's at the expense of us.
I don't think the wider country are too concerned.
Well, I'm not in the Westminster bubble. I don't work at Westminster.
Well, you're sort of.
Yeah, you are, though. You like Labour.
I'm not in the bubble either, but sort of.
Right, well, anyway, this show is nothing without you and your views. Come on, let's welcome our great British voice on your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go to? Oh, not Richie Sunak. Let's go to Alan McNeely. He's there. Should we go to Grimsby? Grimsby! Alan, right, so do you think this is a witch hunt for Suella Braverman? Should she go? Does she have to go because of this?
Good afternoon, Nana. It probably is a witch hunt, another political and media storm in the teacup. She's obviously made a mistake. She resigned for that. The fact that they've reinstated her under a new government, perfectly okay with me. She seems to be one of the few people who's really got an idea about what needs to be done. And, people need to get behind her because the channel crossings are a real issue, both on the draining resources in the country, but also from a security point of view. We've all these people coming in, and most of them, we don't know who they are. And lots of them are disappearing out into the economy, into various criminal organisations. And they're also jumping the queue for those people who are in genuine need. So I think she should stay. She'll sink or fall in what she does, whether she's successful or not with her policies. And I think an awful lot of the rest of it, yes, have a look at the situation, see what actually happened, because there's lots of tittle-tattle about it. But let her crack on with it. The sooner the better.
Exactly. Well, I feel the same way as you, Alan. Thank you very much for talking to me. That's Alan McNeely. He's there in Grimsby. He's my great British voice. Let's see what you've been saying about this. I wonder what you want to say about whether it's trying to stop the witch hunt. Andrew says, yes, everyone is allowed to make a mistake or two. Simon said, this witch hunt against a right-wing Home Secretary who has promised to be tough on migrants is as predictable as is it boring. As Michael Gove said today, you only take flack when you're over the target. Exactly. Brian says, definite witch hunt, but thankfully she wasn't offered any cake. If she'd been offered some cake, it would have been much worse for her. So true. So true. I know, I'm sick and tired. I wish they'd just get on with the job. We can deal with whatever it is, but we don't need all the detail, right? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's World View. Now, I'll be heading to the States to get the latest from President Joe Biden and his latest gaffes.
And by the way, if they do, that means, not a joke, everybody, that's why we were defeated in 2018 when they tried to do it. We went to 54 states.
But there are 53. That's on the way after this.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Obviously, there are 50 states. It's just a joke, honestly. Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Welcome if you just joined us. It is now time for World View, and joining me to talk about Russia is political commentator and Russia expert Danny Armstrong. Danny, so on Friday we talked to a former resident of Kherson. What is the latest from Kherson?
Well, Kherson, as we know, is of huge importance to both sides. It's the largest city that's under Russian occupation at the moment, one of the 4 regions that was annexed by Russia. Hugely important because it's the gateway to Crimea, and of course, anybody who controls Crimea controls the ports.
I see, so that's why. Now, I want to ask you, because President Putin claimed that the Royal Navy blew up Nord Stream 2, and obviously we said that was ludicrous. Are people in Russia believing that, and what is the take on that?
It's not just people in Russia that might believe it. I personally don't believe that Russia blew up Nord Stream. I believe that if you were going to ask me, the US, Joe Biden said that if Russia further invades Ukraine, then they would put a stop to Nord Stream.
But he's blaming the British, isn't he?
Putin's blaming the British. I mean, for me, it makes sense for Russia to blame anybody because I believe it's all a distraction while they buy time in Kherson and ready for a battle of that city.
And what about the hacking of Liz Truss then by these agents? Because that's what people are saying. Is that?
Well, what do you expect from Liz Truss? I mean, I was in Moscow when she visited as Foreign Secretary, and she was really seen as kind of a figure of fun. She mistook the Balkans for the Baltics. She refused to recognise Russia's sovereignty over a Russian city. She seemed to have a photo opportunity and an outfit for every single location, and she was kind of seen as a figure of fun in the Russian media. I mean, we've seen with Suella Braverman her leaks also, and we're talking about somebody who's not really fit to be keeping sort of government secrets. I'm not surprised that these allegations have come out.
Well, that's your view.
That's my view. I mean, we can only have suspicions about this. We can only have suspicions about whether it was Russian hacking, whether there was a dirty bomb being readied by Ukraine to strike Russia with. We can only speculate about Nord Stream.
There's a lot of things we can only do. But if we do that, we'll be here forever. The list
all these allegations take attention away from what's happening on the battlefield, and both sides are readying for a battle.
Then what is happening on the battlefield now?
Both sides are readying for a battle in Kherson, which is going to be extremely significant and probably the last push from both sides before winter hits.
It's going to be tough, isn't it? Well, Danny, thank you very much. That is Danny Armstrong, political commentator. Right, should we travel over to America? I've been looking forward to this. Let's have a chat to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudderidge. Paul, this is interesting, wasn't it? We had Joe Biden, who made some notable gaffes this week. He also got Rishi Sunak's name wrong, which I thought was funny, and that there were 54 states. Tell me more.
Yes, how is Prime Minister Rishi Sunak doing, actually? Any feedback on that? That's how he's been named by our dear leader, Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden. Yeah, so he was in Pennsylvania, and he described how in 2018, when he'd been campaigning for Obamacare, that he campaigned in all 54 states. But to be fair to him, that's only 3 fewer than Obama had said in 2008. Obama said that he'd campaigned in all 57.
Oh, dear. So, well, let's have a look at the clip. We've got the clip. Let's take a look.
And by the way, if they do, that means, not a joke, everybody, that's why we were defeated in 2018 when they tried to do it. We went to 54 states.
Well, I made a joke and said there were 53, so I thought that was quite funny. But yeah, so
that's presidential. That's presidential.
So how's it been received then, his sort of behaviour? People starting to accept that perhaps he's just not quite there?
No, I mean, that's the starting point, is we think he's not quite there. Look, the whole thing is, I don't know if you can see this, and this is just my personal read of the situation. The Democrat support for Joe Biden is melting away. Ever since he couldn't get the deal with Saudi Arabia to help him out with some oil. I've said it before, I've been castigated for this. I am telling you, Hillary is warming up on the touchline. It is the Democrats who are ebbing away their support from Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. I honestly think now that his purpose has been served. They're going to let him get shellacked in the midterms, and he will be I'm saying it's by Hillary. I think she is the ultimate mover, and her supporters really control the DNC. So that's what I think is the play. But yes, he's being abandoned. The power has gone out of the room.
I just want to have a quick look at this Rishi Sunak, or whatever he called him. Let's have a look at that, because that was hilarious.
We've got news. Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister.
It's hilarious. What about what's been going on with Nancy Pelosi then? Because she's broken her silence on the attack on her husband, Paul. What do we know about that?
Well, again, there's conjecture. The wonderful thing about Elon Musk coming back to Twitter is there is actually now debate about what may have happened. But yes, Paul Pelosi, husband of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, was attacked in his home by an intruder on Thursday night. Wish him a speedy recovery, etc. But the way the left have been reporting this is that you get the impression that, like, Trump was present and shouting instructions to the attacker. Yeah. So now the thing is, she has broken her silence. She's, she's saying she's quite rightly shocked and this is a horrible incident. But maybe in future, Nancy Pelosi will not praise protesters who target the homes of Supreme Court justices. Perhaps she'll see the connection between violent rhetoric and violence. So hopefully something good may come out of this.
OK, and listen, Paul, we've got 10 seconds. So Twitter and Elon Musk, briefly, what's the view? Because will they get Trump back on, do you think?
Trump will come back on eventually. He's on a deal with Truth Social that he can't post for 6 hours after he's posted on Truth Social. So even if he wanted to at the moment, he couldn't, but he will eventually end up back on Twitter. I think that's a given.
Well, Paul Dudderidge, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. That's Paul Dudderidge from the Politics People podcast. Lastly, let's turn our attention to Iran and talk to Maya Tusi about the latest in Iran. Maya, MP Bob Stewart raised an important point in Parliament this week. Apparently, members of the Islamic regime plan to get visas and hide in Britain after the revolution. Tell us a bit more.
Yes, it's quite concerning. It's not the first time something like this has happened. We've essentially had open relationship while being quite tough on Iran for decades. It's a very hybrid, weird relationship. They're doing the same thing in Canada, and Justin Trudeau is also under pressure to sort out this situation where the Islamic regime leaders and their relatives and families are planning to escape. Two of the hubs are basically London and parts of Canada. And we have obviously put pressure on the Foreign Office. Bob Blackman, as you mentioned, raised this question in the House of Commons. We still haven't actually heard anything yet. The Foreign Office and the ministers didn't know about it. They actually admitted in Parliament, we don't know anything about this. They probably don't even know where Iran is, which is quite sad. Because they apart from you guys, the mainstream media are not really interested in this whole chaos anyway. So why would you expect our MPs, who are so busy not knowing what they're actually up to, know what the Foreign Office is actually doing? So that's actually the latest update, but things are still continuing. The uprising continues to escalate. It's now, I think, the 45th day of this consistent revolution, and the regime is still failing to crush it, unlike previous times. We now have evidence that they have brought in foreign forces from Iraq and Lebanon, and unconfirmed reports that some from Pakistan, well, we don't actually know. But these people, because a lot of their own members and security forces have defected to the revolution, so they have to rely on Hamas and Hezbollah and all the others who are part of the Revolutionary Guard to come to Iran and beat up their own citizens, which is really disgusting.
Well, listen, Martusi, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for your view. That's Maya Tusi, a political commentator. If you just joined me, welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come after this. So it's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board if you've just joined me. Where on earth have you been? Listen, for the next hour, you need to stay with me because me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. Now, coming up at 5 o'clock, just after the news, I'll be joined by Stanley Johnson live in the studio. He'll be talking about his life in the limelight, the highs, lows, lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And then stay tuned for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are universities still a bastion of free speech? That's all after your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Improvised bombs have been thrown at a migrant processing centre in Dover. A man drove up to the facility and threw several homemade devices which had fireworks attached to them. Border Force and military personnel were seen extinguishing a fire along the perimeter. A Reuters photographer who witnessed the incident says the man then drove to a nearby petrol station where he claimed his own life. An army bomb disposal team was called to the site to examine the scene. The attack comes after British authorities said yesterday was extremely busy in terms of migrant activity, with nearly 1,000 people crossing the channel in 24 small boats. It brings the total number of rescues so far this year to almost 40,000. In India, rescue efforts are underway after hundreds of people fell into a river when a suspension bridge collapsed. Government officials say at least 60 people have been killed, but it's feared that number will still rise. 30 people were critically injured. The incident happened in western Gujarat state in the town of Morbi. A period of national mourning has been declared in South Korea following a deadly stampede which killed more than 150 people. 22 foreign nationals from 12 countries are among the victims who were crushed during Halloween celebrations in Seoul. Most were in their teens and 20s. More than 80 people were injured. The country's president, who visited the scene, has ordered a thorough investigation into the cause. Australian Nathan Tavaniti described a wave of people in a narrow alley. One of his friends died.
There's so many people. What are you going to do with 10 people? Yeah. And I had to turn around and I told the crowd, you can't come this way. People are dying. Because I already knew how bad it was. And people were being so rude, and I had to tell them, you can't come this way. And then it took so long for emergency services to arrive.
Serious security concerns have been raised following reports that the phone of the former Prime Minister Liz Truss was hacked. The government has been urged to launch an urgent investigation into the apparent breach. Citing unnamed sources, the Mail on Sunday says spies suspected of working for the Russian president gained access to sensitive information while she was running for the Tory leadership. It also claims up to a year's worth of messages were downloaded, including top-secret details about Ukraine. The West has accused Russia of weaponizing food after the country suspended a Black Sea grain deal. Moscow's move follows a claim that its fleet in Crimea was attacked by drones, which it says have now been recovered and analysed. Russia's ambassador to Washington suggested British military specialists helped Ukraine organise the strike, which the UK denies. A series of Royal Mail strikes planned for the next 2 weeks have been called off. The Communication Workers Union says it decided to delay the action after receiving a letter from the company's legal team. Members of the CWU are involved in a long-running dispute over pay and working conditions. The union says strikes will resume on the 12th of November. The Bank of England is expected to unveil its biggest interest rate hike in 33 years as it works to tackle inflation. Economists believe the Monetary Policy Committee will increase the rate by 0.75 percentage points to 3% on Thursday. It comes amid warnings that spending cuts and tax hikes under the new Prime Minister could lead to a deeper recession. And the number of rough sleepers in London has increased by 21% in a year. City Hall figures show there were over 5,000 people on the capital streets between April and September. The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, is urging the government to take immediate action to tackle rising bills and housing costs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, Nana, it's back to you.
Good afternoon. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome if you just joined me. Now, for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is author and broadcaster Christian Hamilton and also former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. Still to come, each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, Stanley Johnson, the head of the Johnson family dynasty, will be in the studio. Now, he's known for being the father of the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And Stanley is famed for being a staunch environmentalist. He's rubbed shoulders with international world leaders and has also enjoyed appearing on reality TV shows such as I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I'll be finding out all the juicy details from his time inside the jungle and also what he's up to now. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are universities still a bastion for free speech? Cambridge University alumni are withdrawing donations due to an intensifying row after one of the colleges publicly denounced a guest speaker over their views on sex and gender. Now, this has called into question whether universities can still be considered places where free speech is welcome. Give me your thoughts as ever. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. It is now time for today's Outside. And of course, Stanley Johnson joins me in the studio. Now, he's well known for being the head of the Johnson family, including being the father of Boris Johnson. Now, Stanley is well known for his work as a Conservative MEP and also famed for his environmental work and his views. Now, he's rubbed shoulders, as I said, with many international celebrities and world leaders and done quite a few reality shows, which includes I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in 2017, where he came 7th. And during the show, he struck up close friendship with the Made in Chelsea's star, Georgia Toffolo. I remember that. I loved that show, which led to his cameo appearance on the popular Channel 4 show. Stanley has 6 children, including Boris, former MP and Minister Joe Johnson, and journalist Rachel Johnson. Stanley has also climbed one of the world's highest mountains, Mount Kilimanjaro, numerous times in his 70s to prove age is just a number. I'm pleased to say He's here in the studio now. Stanley, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, you're very kind to say numerous times for Kilimanjaro. It was actually only twice.
Well, that's still more than one. You can get away with saying that.
Technically correct, I suppose.
So I want to start with just going back a bit and finding out more about your life and how you kind of came into politics. I know you were an MEP for some time.
Well, indeed. How did I come into politics? I came into politics because it always struck me, if you want to do something in life, the political way is quite an effective way. You know, if you want levers, well, the political lever is one way of getting things done. And originally I said, well, let's try and go through the way of being an MP. But actually, more or less at the time when I was all set to do that, somebody said to me, would I like to join the European Commission? Because Britain, by then, I'm talking now about January 1973, had just joined Europe, you see, and Britain had joined, obviously, the European Commission, and British people were being invited to apply. And someone said to me, Stanley, we think you'd be a good chap there. And Britain's probably got its flag on a job which is called Head of the Prevention of Pollution and Nuisances Division. I said, well, fine. But after 5 or 6 years in that, I'm talking now about 1979, there were the first direct elections to the European Parliament. And I said, fine, I've done 6 years as a civil servant. And by the way, we wrote a lot of that environmental legislation, and later on I'll talk about that. But I said, look, there's a fantastic opportunity to be an MEP. And I was lucky enough to be selected for the fantastic constituency of the Isle of Wight in East Hampshire. And I've got to say, I virtually made it to the Guinness Book of Records because I had 95,000 majority over the next candidate, who was a lovely lady called Lady Nancy Sear. I didn't quite make it to the Guinness Book of Records because the chap who got West Sussex was a wonderful man called Madron Seligman. He had a couple of thousand more votes than I did. But still, that was how I got on. So for me, I came in effective politics via the European route.
And you've had you've done quite a few things. I mean, obviously you're very much into the environment. You're really focused on your environmentalist work. What would you say, in your view, the way we are moving towards this net zero agenda? Do you think that we are going in the right direction?
Well, this country has done its part in this. I mean, I go all the way back to 1992. Oddly enough, this year, which is 2022, is the 30th anniversary of the Rio conference. It was so-called Earth Summit, which adopted the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, abbreviated to UNFCCC. Well, that set out some targets, to limit the rise in the world's atmospheric temperature. Those targets were refined when we got almost 25 years later to Paris. Paris said, no, let's say what we mean. Let's mean not more than 1.5. If we can possibly do it, if we actually can't make 1.5, then at the very least, not more than 2. So we've had some targets, and this country, I've got to say, was the first to legislate legally for a legal limit to the objective. And we legislated in 2008 with the Climate Act, and we've actually brought that forward now. So in terms of setting the targets, we've done well. Have we achieved them? No. I think the answer is no to that, and taking the world as a whole, we certainly haven't, because in the run-up to this COP 2027, you'll see that the UNEP, which is the United Nations Environment Programme, has just come out with a report which says, oh, well, brilliant people like Alok Sharma, who chaired the last meeting, said 1.5, let's keep it alive. UNEP has just come out and said, actually, we're more like headed to 2.8 degrees. And this is very bad news.
Yeah, that's bad news. Bad news indeed. I mean, obviously, Boris, your son, he was a big environmentalist.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. You see, I look at this, and truth to tell, obviously, I'm biased. I mean, you very kindly said I'm head of the family. I don't believe that. I think the family is what it is, and Boris has certainly been a tremendous influence. And he, I think, has been very important in the UK environmental policy recently. For example, the G7 meeting in Carbis Bay came out firmly in favour of moving towards net zero on nature protection. The Environment Act, which we passed last year, actually lays a nature protection target. But one of the things, Nana, which really worries me, and by the way, I very much hope Boris does go does go to Sharm el-Sheikh, because, you know, look what's happened the last couple of days. The mere speculation as to whether Boris will go to Sharm el-Sheikh has actually put COP27 on the agenda. And I was slightly disappointed, actually, when someone said, well, actually, you know, it's not really as important as Glasgow. I think that's perhaps, you know, diplomatically not a brilliant thing to say, and realistically not. I think year after year after year now, we should be having heads of states going there. So I hope he will go there. And by the way, I hope he will defend our record. But I want him to do one thing also, and that is, this may sound a bit odd, but I want him to appeal to the British government to actually ditch a legacy of the brief Truss administration, which has resulted in Mr. Rees-Mogg, as he left office, proposing, would you believe it, that we will now, as it were, scrap or sunset 750 environmental laws, and a lot of other laws too, but it's those laws precisely, Boris needs to make the point, which are going to give us the ability to meet our nature protection international targets and our climate international targets. So quite ironically, Boris will be there, A, to proclaim our proud record, but B, to say, actually, you know, watch out, chaps, we are going to really think again about this ill-advised piece of legislation which Rees-Mogg put before the House.
Well, you said you hope he'll go, but then you said Boris will be going. So do you know, will he be going?
No, I can't speak for him, but I will very much so I can speak for myself, because I just explained why I think it'd be absolutely brilliant. And just take the Amazon, for example. We know there'll be a new Brazilian president. What is number one problem? Really, it's the continued destruction of the Amazon. I wrote a piece in the New Scientist, would you believe it, in 1970 about the destruction of the Amazon. That is going on apace. And whoever it is, whether it's Mr. Bolsonaro or whether it's Mr. Lula da Silva, they need to say, appeal to the world, and we need to appeal to them.
Do you think it's important that, because obviously Rishi Sunak said he's not going to COP27.
Well, we don't know that for sure, do we?
It seems like he's not going to go. He's sending Alex.
I still hope he will.
Well, but he said he's sending somebody else. He may be doing some other meeting, and then of course the King Charles isn't going either. Do you think that King Charles should go? I mean,
I've got to say, he has been absolutely brilliant. If I go back to, I think I mentioned Paris in December 2015. His presence there was absolutely crucial. What he said in Glasgow last year, crucial. And look, it is far above my pay grade to say who should go where. But that said, all I can say is his continued interest, as witnessed, for example, by the meeting held in Buckingham Palace yesterday, is absolutely vital.
Yeah, I actually, even though I think King Charles should butt out of certain things, I actually think that the climate, what they're calling an emergency, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that things to do with the climate that are global, I don't think that's necessarily political. I think that's something that he should really be doing, and politics we should actually not worry about politics.
Well, there's quite an interesting point here, which you've just raised. Yeah. You know, King Charles is, of course, king of the United Kingdom and its constituents. He's also king of Scotland, but he's king of, as far as I remember, 12 or 13 other countries, and I do wonder whether those countries might quite like King Charles, their king, to be in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Now, do you think? Are you disappointed that Boris didn't run again?
Well, I don't talk about family matters
but you can say that
on television. I'm not talking about family matters here. We are where we are on this one. We've got a fine, upstanding Prime Minister who has taken on a difficult hand and he's driving it forward. As long as he ditches Rees-Mogg, he'll have my vote.
Oh, yeah. No, well, I'll be honest. I wanted Boris to run again, but obviously he didn't. Do you think he'll come back though? Will he come back later? Maybe.
Again, I'm absolutely not speculating. Not in there, of course, it's worth a try, but definitely not speculating.
But you think, but Rishi Sunak, he seems to have his hand on the tether. Seems to have a good handle on the economy and things. Do you feel confident going forward?
Yes, I do. I promise you, I do feel confident. I certainly don't want to make it seem as though I've been negative. I think basically what happened, it was his very first day of office, this Rees-Mogg thing, came in. Do you see what I mean? I think he must have been taken completely by surprise. So my thoughts are with him, my prayers are with him, and my expectations are with him, but I've just got my fingers crossed.
And your view on the whole migrant situation, I wondered where you stand on, having seen the way it's been handled. I know you said, obviously, you were there before we joined the EU, you became an MEP, so you must have a handle on these sort of issues around the Europe.
Yes. Look, this is where I am. I think we've got to forget this war, which in a way is what Rees-Mogg was all about. He's still fighting that war. God, we've really got to wrap it up, show them we're really in charge. No, the crucial thing at this moment is for us to rebuild as firmly as we can the bridges with Europe. We absolutely need to do that. We need to do it, by the way, for economic reasons as much as anything else. If we let our own standards drop, environmental standards, animal welfare standards, labour protection, don't forget, the labour protection laws are terrifically under threat. Our friends in the European Union are not going to say, OK, we'll continue to trade with you on the normal arrangements. We're already seeing a fall-off in our trade with Europe. We certainly can't afford to let them, say, look, you're not playing your side of the pitch.
Well, if we move away from politics then, because I watched when you were on I'm a Celebrity.
Oh, did you?
I loved that, you and Georgia Toffolo. You got on so well. What was doing that like? A lot of people say that it was actually a lot harder than it looked.
Well, I saw you had Christine Hamilton on earlier today. And Christine, I think, was there in...
I remember that one.
I think she must have been there in 2003. And I went, well, I don't want to, say... Anyway, she was I thought it was tremendously good fun. I thought it was particularly good fun in the sense that for 17 days, I think I was there, you can't write anything, you can't read anything, you can talk to your fellow, contestants, and you've got your thoughts for company. I sat there and I looked at this wonderful Australian rainforest and I thought, what a fantastic country Australia is. And I often go to Australia anyway. And then it gives you a chance to do all sorts of things you wouldn't normally do, like eat bull's testicles, for example.
Nice.
Since when are you going to be given that opportunity again? And I'm only joking now, of course. There are all sorts of things. And I remember, for example, with Becky Vardy. Now, Becky Vardy's become tremendous. She was such a nice lady. Tremendously nice.
Vardy?
Becky Vardy, yes.
Really?
Have I got this right?
No. You said she's a nice woman.
Yes, she is. I want to tell you, she absolutely was. Couldn't be nicer. And we had Amir Khan. We had Shabi Khorsandi. We had a wonderful collection. So who would not enjoy being with people? Well, basically, I worked out that I was 40 years older than the average age of that group. Well, it's fine. It's fine
sounds
for me.
great. It sounds great. I sort of wouldn't want to do that one. I'd have to take my wig off.
They'll have you off. They'll have you off in Brisbane. Still time to join the crowd. I see that.
No, thank you. Well, actually, how much? How much? Yeah. All right, I'll do it.
You will, exactly.
You can twist my arm.
No.
So Stanley, what are you up to now then? What are you doing now then?
I am doing all kinds of things. I'm actually very heavily involved in trying to set up something called the World Coastal Forum, which is going to group countries around the world, communities around the world, even local authorities, to say, actually, 50% of the world's population lives within 10 kilometres of the coast, something like 50% of the world's economic activities. So on the way back from Italy, I'm going to Italy on Monday, but on the way back I'm going to spend some time in Geneva where we got a meeting, an international meeting, which will launch this World Coastal Forum. And I've got to say, my hat's off. I know the Chinese are not everybody's flavour of the month, but the Chinese have been fantastic in the effort they have put in to try and get this WCF going. And it will go, it will work. And, 3 years from now, we will find that countries around the world have said, yes, actually, the coasts really need protection, not just because of global warming, but for all sorts of reasons.
Well, Stanley Johnson, thank you so much for joining me. It's so good to talk to you.
Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. That is, of course, Stanley Johnson. That was Outside. Wonderful. Well, if you just joined me, welcome. This is GB News. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking this on the way next. Are universities still a bastion of free speech? We'll be discussing that after the break.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Gosh, that's Stanley Johnson. He's so super interesting, isn't he? If you've just joined me, you've just missed that, but don't worry, you can catch up on the GB News app. It's totally free. I'm Nana Akua. Of course, this is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, are universities still bastions of free speech? Cambridge University alumni are withdrawing donations due to an intensifying row after the Master of Gonville and Caius College publicly denounced a guest speaker. Now, the author, Helen Joyce, who believes men and women are being redefined by trans activists, was invited to give a talk on gender ideology at Cambridge's fourth oldest college. However, before Joyce had even uttered a syllable, the college's master, Professor Pippa Rogerson, denounced Joyce, dubbing her views hateful and insulting. Rogerson's comments led to a flurry of alumni withdrawing financial bequests, and Cambridge University are yet to comment over the matter. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are universities still free bastions or bastions of free speech? I'm joined now by Professor of International Relations at the University of Exeter, Professor Doug Stokes. Professor, welcome. Thank you for joining me. First of all, what do you think of the sort of public denunciation of Helen Joyce? I mean, basically, they sort of castigated her because she was there talking about gender ideology, which I think she believes that men are men and women are women. What is your view of that sort of, you know, she's sort of sent off campus ultimately, not even having a chance to speak?
I think it's very sad. I think it undermines academic freedom, and it's robbing the students. I mean, universities are ultimately there to promote debate, critical debate, interesting issues, and open people's minds. And if you have a senior tutor, somebody from the top down, saying these views are beyond the pale, they're morally unacceptable, and we can't possibly expose our students to these dangerous ideas and etc. And it's quite personal attacks. If you actually look at what she said, it wasn't particularly good. I think it totally undermines academic freedom. I mean, academics to debate amongst themselves, amongst controversial issues, no problem whatsoever. But when it comes from the top down and done in this kind of very weak language of therapy and protecting the students' emotions, it just infantilizes students. And students don't want that. They want to grow as adults. They are adults. They should be treated with respect. And this is disrespectful to students, unfortunately.
Yeah, you say that, but a lot of these students seem to sort of go along with it as well in a way, don't they? Because you've seen them, I think they were outside and they were sort of, jeering her on sort of thing and not happy with her being there. So it feels as though this is something that's actually from within as well. And this is perpetuated by a lot of those dons and those people who are academics who should potentially know better than that, surely.
Well, I completely agree. I think dons and academics should know better than that. I mean, but so I think you're always going to get a minority of students that feel very strongly about various issues. But those people should be invited in to debate or whatever. But that fringe minority or those opinions should be allowed to flourish, and they stand and fall on their own merits. But the problem is when you get the endorsement of those ideas by university leadership teams, that's when the rot really sets in. If you have an open debate where people can come and talk, you may be opposed to just what's so-called gender critical feminism or whatever your viewpoint is. Come in, have a debate, and university leaders and universities should be there to sort of encourage that form of dialogue, that form of contestation. That's ultimately what progresses our civilization. When you have a top-down imposition and castigation, as you opened this piece up with, by a very senior person within the university, it totally betrays the value of the university system, and it is ultimately disrespectful to all students.
Well, Dove, stay right there, because I'm joined also by author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me. Rebecca, why do you think universities are still bastions of free speech, if you believe that?
I think it's more that universities are no different from how they've ever been. Students have always been sort of liberal, left-leaning, and adults outside of academic institutions have always complained about it. It goes back, you remember the perception of students as hippies who were all obsessed with ban the bomb. That is a perennial feature of students, largely because people are more left-leaning when they're younger and often more right-leaning when they get older. And the current generation of young people's major focal issue is trans rights, or at least for a lot of them. When I was at university, it was proportional representation, and when one friend of mine were at university, it was fox hunting. There's always something that's cared about very deeply, and you feel things very strongly when you're very young. This is very normal. This is no different from what came previously. I remember just after I left university, there was a huge furore about no platforming when they didn't want Milo Yiannopoulos to do a debate at Bristol, where I went. This is not a new issue. It's just that it likes to be brought up and presented as something that's unique to current teenagers.
I was going to say yes, but when I was at university, whilst we may have felt passionately about things, we still were able to have the other side of the argument, and people weren't sent away. Or, I mean, it was a long time ago, Rebecca, to be fair. But I'm old. But that other side of the argument was allowed.
Well, so I left university in 2014, and no platforming was very much a conversation then. I think the issue is that most people agree there are some types of speaker who shouldn't be invited on campus. So if somebody is an active racist or anti-Semite who says that a particular ethnicity or religion should be put to death, I think we would all agree that person probably shouldn't be given an opportunity to come in and do a lecture. The issue is where you put the line. Now, for me, that is probably the line. For some people, a climate change denier is in that side of things. For some people, somebody who doesn't believe in trans rights is on that side of things. And the difficulty is knowing where the objective line is.
Well, let me bring back Doug in there, because you can have a chat with Doug, because I think that there's an objective line, of course, but, you should be allowed to have your view as to whether a man is a man and a woman is a woman. I just think that that's quite straightforward. But, Doug, where do you lie with this?
I think I agree with what you just been said. I mean, I think there's always been this controversy, but my point really is that ultimately, I don't, in terms of the ideological hegemony on university campus, it is what it is. But my main thing is when it's imposed from the top down, because I think that's where the values of the university system are ultimately betrayed. There's always been controversy, ban the bomb, CND, that's a long history of that. But it's more about when you have this creeping authoritarian paternalism that can done under the auspices of therapy and protecting the emotions of people. And also, the law is actually very clear when you look at it. I mean, the EHRC has done some fantastic guidance in 2019. In fact, it's the lead body for policing, ultimately, the Equality Act, in relation to academic freedom and how that stands in relation to the Equality Act. And so what you tend to have in the university system is you have very powerful now EDI bureaucracies, equality, diversity, inclusion bureaucracies, using their interpretation of the Equality Act to degrade and ultimately to chill academic freedom on university campuses. When you actually look at the law, what the law actually says, it says you can't use people's perceived emotions, oh, it hurt my feelings, or something like that, ultimately to no platform other people. I mean, for me, it's really about open debate and pluralism and tolerance and equality of opportunity and letting those things take place. And as soon as you have a top-down imposition, a therapeutic paternalism, doing it to protect the students' feelings, very much how it was framed in the Cambridge thing with Helen Joyce, that then is a problem.
Rebecca.
My issue with that is I disagree, because I think universities, if anything, need to do more to be paternalistic, I suppose, towards their students, in the sense that current students lost 2 years of their lives to COVID. They're emotionally, generally fairly immature. And we are younger now at 18 than we were 100 years ago because of the way that life works. And I went to Bristol, which has the most horrific suicide rate, because universities do very little to safeguard the emotions of their students. Now, where I agree with you is that safeguarding the emotions of your students is not saying we will not have people who are scary to come in and give talks. It's putting the support in place that if you are very, very triggered by something like that, if Helen Joyce being on campus for you is making you have suicidal ideation, you need help. That is a terrifying, awful thing. But her not being there isn't the answer. Better mental health support for students is the answer. And I would just say, I totally understand where you're coming from, but my stance is that universities should be for the students, and they are, broadly speaking, a lot of the time more for the research. And I think students should be allowed to do whatever silliness they want to, because everyone is stupid at 21. I was very stupid at 21. And they should be able to play nicely and grow up. My issue is when academic research is being suppressed in adults, in people who are postgraduates, and that in the trans arena is worryingly common. There was a university, I believe, in the West Country where somebody was given the right to do their thesis in detransitioning, and then had that revoked because the university didn't want to have their name associated with it. That is where I think you need to have a problem. Students will always be controversial and left-leaning, but these
Rebecca,
are
we
people
have to leave there because we've got to head towards the news now. But Rebecca Reid, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. And also, Professor Doug Stokes, good to talk to you as well. Well, we reached out to Cambridge University for comment, and the college itself, and we'll hopefully hear back tomorrow. We will keep you updated on that. But right now, you are with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and digital radio. On the way, we'll continue with our great British debate. I'm asking, are universities still bastions of free speech? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5:35. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Improvised bombs have been thrown at a migrant processing centre in Dover. A man drove up to the facility and threw up to 3 devices which had fireworks attached to them. Border Force and military personnel were later seen extinguishing a fire along the perimeter. A Reuters photographer who witnessed the incident says the man then drove to a nearby petrol station where he claimed his own life. An army bomb disposal team is at the site examining the scene. In India, rescue efforts are underway after a suspension bridge collapsed in Gujarat province. Hundreds of people are thought to have fallen in the river, with government officials saying at least 68 people have been killed. The 230-metre bridge had only reopened to the public last week after it was closed for 6 months for renovations. A period of national mourning has been declared in South Korea following a deadly stampede which killed over 150 people. 22 foreign nationals from 12 countries are among the victims who were crushed during Halloween celebrations in Seoul. Most were in their teens and 20s. More than 80 people were injured. The country's president, who visited the scene, has ordered a thorough investigation into the cause. A series of Royal Mail strikes planned for the next 2 weeks have been called off. The Communication Workers Union says it decided to delay the action after receiving a letter from the company's legal team. Members of the CWU are involved in a long-running dispute over pay and working conditions. The union says strikes will resume on the 12th of November. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me. Noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are universities still bastions for free speech? Cambridge University alumni are withdrawing donations due to an intensifying row after the Master of Gonville and Caius College publicly denounced a guest speaker over their views on sex and gender. Now, the college's master denounced the speaker, dubbing her views hateful and insulting. Now, this all led to a number of student protesters turning up to demonstrate outside the talk, chanting, "Trans rights are human rights." So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are universities still bastions of free speech? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. Right, so Christine, what were your university days like? I imagine you did go, did you, or did you not go?
I did. I went to York.
Yes.
And I remember there, it was at the, terribly old, it was the very end of the 60s, and university students were revolting all over the place. They were burning barricades in Paris and goodness knows what. So it was quite, York was a very left-wing university, very left-wing. I mean, the Labour Party were way to the left of most of them, to the right of most of them. And I can remember being asked in a lecture, now, Christine, what are the views of the Conservatives? And I thought, I was outraged then, but it's got nothing to do with it, what my political views were. I was known to be a Conservative because I was an officer of the Conservative Association, which was actually quite big. But now, I mean, it's got ridiculous. I first became aware of this closing down of debate at universities when, of all people, oh dear, her name's gone out of my head, the bra-burning lady.
Oh, Germaine Greer.
Germaine Greer. When Germaine Greer was cancelled at a university, I can't remember if it was Oxford or Cambridge, and I just thought, this is nonsensical when she can be cancelled. And I was interested in your debate just now. I'm afraid I forget the gentleman's name. If students get together as a body and say, we do not want this person to come and speak at our union, that is one thing. But for the academics to say, you shall not have this person to speak, I think it is grotesque. And it's too paternalistic, and why should what's her name, Pippa Rogerson, who's the master of the college, why should she tell the students who they can have to speak and who they can't? I mean, it's outrageous. To me, it's completely outrageous. What the students decide to do is one thing, but they should not be told by the bosses of the college.
Peter?
Well, I'm wary of some generalisations that kind of free speech is dying or anything like that, but clearly some newspapers like The Telegraph alight on these stories occasionally. To me, as a liberal person, regardless of any particular view, you should be allowed to say things that are disagreeable, whether that's in a university debate or in TV. It's just part of having a free society. And the law should only stop you when you're doing something beyond the pale. And to pick one example, advocating or defending violence would be an obvious one where the law steps in to say you don't have a free speech defence. But I think, and we've all done it at times, and it's just part of having a free society that you can have two people having a debate and anyone can say things that are stupid or disagreeable or rude, and that is the nature of a democracy. I also think we've got to keep, although I'm very concerned by what I read about happened at Cambridge University, we've got to keep this thing in perspective. Britain is generally a flourishing democracy with a flourishing free press. I've just read a feature in one of the Sunday papers about Chinese-controlled Hong Kong. So we do have to keep things in perspective, even though it looks like Cambridge has tripped up a bit in recent days.
I mean, what's the point of going to university if you're not there to discuss, to exchange views, to debate issues? That's what it's all about. It's one of the points of going to university, to broaden your mind, to introduce you to ideas that you may not have thought about before. Whether you like them or not, I agree. If it's hate speech, that's different. But just somebody who has a different view, you should be allowed to hear them.
Yeah, and I think that's the starting point of this discussion. I was also at York University as an undergraduate, and I was a member of the Labour Party, and I had Conservative friends, and I'd have lots of disagreements with them. And I'm sure if obviously we're a little bit apart in age, but I would have had one or two rows with you. I would have had one or two rows with you if we'd coincided in the Labour and the Tory societies at the same time. But that is part of free speech, and obviously when you're at university, it's quite nice if you can have a cup of tea or a drink afterwards with the people you've been arguing with.
But I think that the real problem was that actually those who are running the university and those who are in charge are the ones who are stopping the free speech. That was the issue.
Well, I think they don't know where to draw the line, do they? I think there's a nervousness around a small number of topics, but clearly transgender rights is one of them. I think going back 30 or 40 years, I'd imagine, certainly from my experience, the issue that has prompted, quite understandably, the greatest sensitivity about speakers is the Middle East.
But this particular subject was about, and it's often with the trans rights and the trans lobby, it often evokes, I think, an overboard response, because ultimately somebody should be able to say that, in their view, biological sex would trump the gender ideology. That, to me, is not heavily controversial. Neither is it offensive. It's just a statement that that's how that person views it. Somebody may well feel the other way, but those views should be allowed to be expressed. And I find it worrying, because I know you talked about China, and China is different, and, we need to be wary of that. But I'd be worried about the people who are the future. So if that's how our educators are teaching those who will be our future, then we will look like China very soon.
Oh, again, I think that's scaremongering to say...
No, I don't think it's scaremongering. Well, that's my view. If we don't keep a track on that and make sure that these people are able to accept other viewpoints, then we are heading in the same direction, surely.
I don't think at all we're heading in the same direction as China, and whatever criticisms I have for the Conservative government or the way they've changed politics, we generally do have free and fair elections, and we can't take those for granted, but we do have free and fair elections, and we do have free debate.
Well, as you said, we can't take them for granted, and I think actually the university are doing a free speech course now to educate the dons and the children and the kids at the university so that they can understand and accept other critical views.
Let me give you some hope briefly. Similar things were said 20 years ago when I was at university about, is free speech under threat, and the next generation of activists turned politicians. Well, 20 years on, we do have a free society. So I think this kind of dystopia has not come about, and I don't think it will, because I have huge faith, and I have Conservative friends who I disagree with enormously, but I have huge faith that there are enormous safeguards in British law to say things that are lawful, however daft they might appear to the people who are listening to them.
Well, that's because there are checks and balances on it.
But if that isn't upheld in universities, or if it's positively discouraged in universities, I think it's a very bad sign. It's the other side of all this coin is all this wokery. I mean, universities said you can't use the word mankind. You can't. I mean, you can't use the word manpower. This is absurd, utterly absurd. Everybody knows what you mean by man. Man embraces woman. You know what mankind means. And to say that at university people you can't use it is just ridiculous.
I think we have to be careful that we don't go down a route that we find ourselves in a place where we actually are unable to work things out. So the young people are unable to critically analyse things and need to be fed things. And if it is those educators... Now, listen, I lecture in schools all the time, and, I'm glad to be able to teach the kids critical thinking and ask them to... tell them to question things and then just go along with a narrative. So in my view, it's important that we do keep checks and balances on this, because otherwise I think, and I don't think it's overboard to imagine that if you carry on suppressing free speech or enabling people to understand other things, you will end up in a place like somewhere like China where they have one narrative and everyone ends up following that.
Sorry.
I mean, I really don't think... If you think about the British printed press, for example, an increasing line, it's one of the fiercest in the world, and American politicians often come over and say, gosh, aren't your newspapers terribly rude about the people in office? And that's one of the virtues of British journalism. And again, I think there's no prospect at all of ending up in a China-type scenario in Britain. No. There's many other concerns about British democracy, from money to the House of Lords to poorer people being denied a voice in public policy making. But I think we're miles off becoming like China.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, you saw lockdown, you saw how this went. I'm afraid that I think we need to keep checks and balances on it all the time, and especially the young people who are being educated, we need to make sure that they are able to take other views. Christine, last
well, the master of the college, Pippa Rogerson, I'm just quoting her, she says, we do not condone or endorse the views that Helen Joyce has expressed on transgender people, which we consider offensive, insulting and hateful. That's her opinion. She may be right, but it is only an opinion. And she, to me, has no right to stop her students hearing those opinions so they can decide for themselves.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the problem with it. Well, let's welcome on our Great British Voice, because this show's nothing without you, and see what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where do we show? Oh, there's three of them. Wonderful. We love that. Right, well, I'll start with Julie Ford. She's in the middle. Judy, what do you think?
Yeah, hi Nana, thank you. I have to say I've agreed with everything that everyone you've had on your panel has said so far in parts, particularly what Rebecca had to say, and I think it was really refreshingly honest that she identifies that 18, 19 and 20-year-olds are mentally a lot younger than maybe we were when we were at university. But for me, university is about opening up your mind to other people's views and opinions, and sometimes university is the only place that you can hear those other views and opinions. So for me, university really does need to allow people to come in with varying views and allow students to be empowered and make informed decisions when it comes to moving on with their lives, because it's in these particular places of education that they will learn the skills that will take them on into their future employment.
Thank you, Julie. Let's go to another Julie. Julie Taylor in Middlesbrough. Julie, you've got about 30 seconds. What's your view?
It's Julia, and it seems to me an intolerant few have decided that protecting people from being offended is more important than advancing human knowledge. And all I can say is these students are going to finish their course with a really narrow view of the world. They're taught what to think rather than how to think, and that's wrong.
I agree with that. And let's go finally to John Reid in Kidderminster. John.
Yes, hello, Nana.
Hello.
My opinion is that I agree with all of you, what you're saying and your two guests there, Nana. Particularly Christine, who's nearer to my age group than the other two guests that you've had. I would say that bureaucracy is going mad here, isn't it? I think that the problem is a simple one. The university are responding to the tick boxes they have to tick to show that they've got a balanced opinion on everything. And in ticking all these boxes just to satisfy the PC brigade, they're missing the point, really. But if she hadn't said what she'd said, no doubt she'd have got criticism from somebody for not saying it. So whilst I don't agree with what she said, I do think it inevitable because of the society we're growing up in.
Thank you very much for that. Nice and succinct as well. John's done this before. John Reid in Kidderminster, thank you very much. Julie Taylor from Middlesbrough and also Julie Ford from Bedfordshire. Lovely to talk to you. Those are my Great British Voices. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying at home. Andy says, is this a serious question? You're free to say whatever the left agrees with. Very good. Peter likes that one. Reg says, no, they are hotbeds of woke ideology, and if students don't go along with it, they're marginalised and labelled as some sort of phobic. Holly says absolutely not. In my experience, if you even hint at right-of-centre ideas in an essay, you won't get above a 2-1, even with sound structure reasoning. Very true. Well, thank you very much for that. Your views resonate with mine. Thank you so much for all your thoughts. But moving on to another story that caught my eye today. The Prime Minister said that cracking down on crime is one of the government's top 3 priorities at autumn statement, and cracking down on woke policing. Ministers are studying the example of Greater Manchester Police, where no-nonsense Chief Constable Steve Watson took Greater Manchester Police out of special measures in just 18 months. So what do you guys think then? Do you think it's time to crack down on woke policing? We've got about 30 seconds here with you, Peter. Come on, quick.
What is woke policing? I mean, I think these things get stated. The number one problem with the police is lack of funding. David Cameron, the coalition, shut a lot of police stations. Looking at the footage just shown, we have policing by consent. So I think if police officers get on with the people in their community from all backgrounds, that's positive.
Christine?
Well, we should certainly do with less woke policing. I mean, policemen dancing the Macarena and whatever that fellow was doing there, going up and down, I've no idea. Police need to concentrate on crime. Fewer crimes are being cracked now. Sorry, wrap it up. Yes, we can do with less woke policing.
Oh, there you go. No more woke. It's a joke. Right now, it's time for Supplement Sunday. Christine, you've got one, haven't you? What have you got?
Well, I absolutely love this story. It's originally in the Manchester Evening News. White van man is dying out.
Oh, no.
Because half of van drivers are now women. So the white male working class stereotype is gone. Of the number of female van drivers, that's over half of white van drivers, 51 read a broadsheet, not a tabloid, a quarter of them are vegetarian, and 7 in 10, that's 70%, prefer a night in rather than going to the pub. My favourite is somebody who is a mother of one. She drives a Mercedes-Benz E Sprinter, whatever that is, and she says, I'm not your stereotypical white van man. First of all, I'm a woman. If I had any newspaper rolled up on my windscreen, it would be the Times business section. And when I'm driving, I usually have business audio books on.
Love it, love it.
Brilliant, love it.
Peter, you've got about 20 seconds now. She's taken up all your time.
Liz Truss failed as Prime Minister, but I did have a little bit of sympathy for her when I read about, as Trade Secretary, she relied on double espresso and Sauvignon Blanc in her trips, and having been on 1 or 2 trade missions myself as a newspaper reporter, I had a lot of sympathy for this idea that whatever gets you through the flights and the handshaking.
Fair enough. I like that too. Very good. And last but not least, Trevor Noah. Did you see that? The Daily Show is being criticised after a segment about Britain's first Asian non-white Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. We've got a clip here. Take a look. This is what he said backstage.
Watching the story of Rishi Sunak becoming England's first Prime Minister of colour, of Indian descent, of all of these things, and then seeing the backlash. You hear a lot of the people saying, oh, they're taking over. You know, now the Indians are going to take over Great Britain.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. What do you think he heard that? I mean, it was ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous. You know, we've had the cowboys, now it's time for the Indians. I mean, that isn't happening in this country. As far as I'm concerned, the people are against Rishi Sunak, but not because he's Asian.
And you, quickly, 10 seconds.
We've got a diverse society, and I don't agree with Rishi Sunak on the policies. I think he's far too close to the rich, but we've got a broad society. That's a good thing.
This is a very good thing too. So on today's show, I've been asking, is it time to stop the witch hunt against Suella? According to our Twitter poll, 77% of you say yes. Thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also Peter Edwards, editor of the Labour List. And also big thank you to you at home. I'll see you next week. Enjoy.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking better with showers easing and clear spells developing for much of the country. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off in the southwest, and here it should be a largely dry end of the day. A few showers are possible, but many will have clear spells to start the night. Also mostly dry in the southeast with lengthy clear spells. However, a few isolated showers are still possible. It will be a mild evening. Across Wales, a few showers are around, but these moving through quickly on a brisk southwesterly wind. However, most places will be largely dry. It's mostly dry across the West Midlands with long clear spells. There is an outside chance of an isolated shower. Still breezy, so temperatures not dropping much, meaning it will stay mild. Any remaining showers across the northeast should clear, with most places turning dry with clear spells. It will be slightly cloudier in the west, rather breezy with temperatures staying mostly in double figures. A cloudier and wetter picture across much of Scotland as showers continue to push northeast. These perhaps heavy for some. However, it will turn drier with clear spells developing. After a showery afternoon, it will turn drier across Northern Ireland with decent clear spells developing. During the night, it will remain relatively mild for this time of year. Overnight, it will become largely dry, but showers lingering mostly in the west. Later, winds will strengthen from the west. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.